Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp., RMO, on the TSX Venture Exchange. Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp. is a Canadian-based mineral exploration project generator. The company currently holds multiple property interests in Ontario with joint venture partners and is seeking further joint venture partners for other drill-ready properties in our portfolio. For more information, please visit our website at rmroyalty.com or call me at 604-922-2030.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is award-winning investigative reporter Bob Mackin, the publisher of thebreaker.news. Welcome back to the show and Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year as well.
It's interesting that the Crown now doesn't plan to hold a peace bond hearing against the two now, I don't know if you use the word acquitted, but certainly not found guilty accused terrorists, John Nuttall and Amanda Korody, who were claimed to have been plotting to blow up the lawn in the legislature during a Canada Day celebration, but really they were set up by the Mounties, weren't they?
Yes, this 2013 incident, Project Souvenir was the name of the sting operation, and what happened was that Amanda Korody and John Nuttall, who were recent converts to Islam back in 2013, were apparently deciding to plant pressure cookers at the legislature on Canada Day to cause mass casualties. It didn't turn out to be as it was originally announced by the RCMP, as it unraveled in court, essentially, that these two people had petty criminal records. John Nuttall had a petty criminal record. They both had addictions. They were both people that, according to the courts, when their lawyers advanced the entrapment argument, were deemed unfit to be able to do this. They had people that were unfit to live their lives day to day, much less commit a mass terrorist attack without the guidance and support of those who surrounded them in this undercover operation. It was deemed entrapment by the BC Supreme Court, and the Court of Appeal agreed with that. Did leave a question open that, the question still is open. What would have happened if the police had never intervened, and if these people had this intent on their minds to do some kind of damage? What could have happened? Could they have fallen to the wrong crowd and created something? We'll never know that, but we do know now is essentially this was a bungled RCMP investigation. It seemed to be something that was meeting an objective, as I found when I wrote about it in 2013 in RCMP business cases, that this type of sting operation had been executed a number of times in the United States to find people who had criminal intent, maybe not so much the ability to carry out the attacks that they were talking about or fantasizing about. But the U.S. authorities had moved on several occasions to charge people, and this is something, this playbook had been imported to Canada by the RCMP. Mother Jones magazine had done some great work on this back in the years before. In 2011, actually, they had an investigative project called Terrorists for the FBI inside the Bureau's secret network that surveils and traps Americans. They looked at 508 files for people who were charged with terrorist-related crimes since 9/11, and almost half of those were people targeted by an informant, and 158 through a sting, and 49 were lured by an informant who led the plot. So when the cases went to court, more often than not, there were guilty pleas. In the U.S., in these cases that Mother Jones magazine looked at, there were 333 guilty pleas and 110 convictions. At the time that they did this, there were about 65 cases still awaiting trial. So, about 59% of the people that were listed as affiliates of Al-Qaeda or another Islamist group. But 209 people, about 41%, had no affiliation at all. These are according to the research that was done by Mother Jones magazine. And back in 2013, I interviewed one of their journalists, Trevor Aronson, who really led the research, and that they found that the targets of FBI counterterrorism stings were really mostly people down on their luck, desperate people out of jobs or mentally ill. They didn't really know much about Islam, In fact, the evidence in the Nuttall and Crody case was that John Nuttall had actually been rejected by a mosque, that he was not someone that they thought was actually adhering to their faith or doing it for the right reasons. So he actually got snubbed by people in the Muslim faith. And what the research that proved in the U.S. proved here, that they were really not having the ability to carry out a terrorist attack until they were surrounded by undercover operatives who led them in that direction. And so that's what the courts found, the BC Supreme Court in 2016 found, and then before Christmas, same thing happened in British Columbia, where the Court of Appeal agreed that this was definitely not the RCMP's finest work, and it threw it back at the prosecution service, wondering if this was, I guess we can only wonder how much this cost taxpayers, and if others who were creating other types of crimes in Canada got away with their crimes while the RCMP focused on this. This is definitely not the finest hour for the RCMP or the prosecution service, especially when we're seeing other cases that are having that might even have more destruction in the wake. We've seen cases go to court and not get to trial in terms of money laundering and fentanyl in recent months. Who knows how many casualties those caused? I don't think they can point to any casualties caused by the Nuttall and Crody prosecution. One thing that is likely in 2019 is a lawsuit. We haven't heard yet definitively from Nuttall and Crody if they're going to sue for some sort of compensation for what has gone on in their lives because of this. But you can bet your bottom dollar there's a lot of lawyers out there who are buzzing around who'd love to take this case, because that could be in the millions if they do decide to sue for going through this whole situation since 2013.
Right. I mean, we have real murder cases that haven't been solved. How much manpower, time, and money was spent on this, or will we ever know?
Don't know if we'll ever know, but there were dozens, and it included people from various RCMP offices, included CSIS, included help from south of the border. It was considerable. These cases probably run in the millions to prosecute. Not only that, but the court time. And then the harm to reputations, that this was not the RCMP's best hour, and they were diverted from doing many other things they could have been doing, but instead they did this. They chose to do this sting operation with a couple of people who, the courts basically said were not capable of doing it on their own.
Now, with fentanyl, we know 4 to 7 Canadians a day are dying from this drug. Could those resources could have been better used there to find out where this is coming from and stop it?
Oh, definitely. The thing we're going to look back at years from now when there are books written, documentaries, movies done about this whole era of the fentanyl, flood of fentanyl on the streets of major cities in Canada, and the casualties, the people that are injured for the rest of their lives, brain injuries, the people that have lost their lives, is going to be about the glacial speed at which government works. It seems like government works really quickly when they want to sell an idea. Well, the propaganda departments at governments are very well staffed, and when they want to put out a message that makes the politicians in their party look good, especially as it gets closer to an election, well, they know how to move mountains. But when it comes to threats to our safety and security, to the health of the public, not so much, unfortunately. They really got caught with their pants down. If they had seen what was going on in the United States many years ago in certain cities, they would have seen opioid problems in small towns in New Hampshire, for instance. And they would have perhaps also, if they had better intelligence and better policing and reports, maybe have caught some of this or seen a trend towards this, maybe even had better policing at postal terminals where international mail comes in. Maybe if they had more boots on the ground in that way, and better data sharing, better information sharing. We got so many agencies that are involved in the equation when it comes to public safety and public security. Maybe they're not all talking to each other because they could have looked at the data, looked at the evidence as it happened, and analyzed it and figured out something's happening here. We don't quite know what it is, but we got to look closer and we got to put more people on it. They could have perhaps identified this problem much sooner. And I think that's what we're going to find in many years. But then again, that's not exactly a surprise. Governments often do move slowly, and which is quite a problem, and allows problems like these to fester. There's a lot of debate about how this should be solved, whether there should be a return to the war on drugs, or on the other side of the coin, whether there should be a safe supply of addictive drugs put out there and administered by health authorities, by governments in some way, shape, or form. I mean, there's so many schools of thought about that. There's also the schools of thought that why isn't government making it as relatively easy to quit hazardous substances as it seems to be able to find them. Of course, no one who's been an addict will ever tell you that it has ever been easy to quit. But why aren't the resources out there to help people should they make the decision to quit? Should they make the decision to go through what can be a very trying time to try to come out the other side and be a better person? Why aren't those facilities and resources available to solve these types of problems for those who do decide enough is enough and they want to change their lives? Again, we've seen a little bit of improvement since the NDP took power from the Liberals. The NDP's put some more money into those areas, but again, it's nowhere near where it should be or could be. And I think that's what people have to be demanding is just where there are holes, better enforcement on the docks, for instance. Way back in the 90s, the federal Liberals closed down the ports police. That was a big mistake then. And for the rest of us in our communities, there should be ways and means of people who want to change their lives to be able to, with one phone call, say, look, I've had enough. Where do I go today to get the help I need?
We'll have more with Bob Mackin right after this.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia, Saskatchewan, and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the pink symbol ABN-AF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Grand Portage Resources recently completed the 2018 drill program on its 100% controlled Herbert Gold Discovery property located in the prolific Juneau Belt in southeast Alaska. Drill results are expected through late 2018. Past drill results included numerous multi-ounce gold assays on multiple veins. Grand Portage trading symbols are GPG on the TSX Venture, GPTRF on the OTCQB, and GPB on Frankfurt. For more information, please visit our website, grandportage.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Bob Mackin. Bob, the Breaker.News has declared China the story of the year for British Columbia. There's a lot of different angles here, Bob. First of all, I guess the highest profile is the Chinese executive held on the allegation that Huawei was somehow laundering funds or money and getting cell technology to Iran.
Indeed, and I drove by her neighborhood in Dunbar on Christmas Day, not to drop off any gifts or anything, just to see what it was like there. And I got there just in time for a security guard to greet a group of people who were walking up the sidewalk and onto the property. He had a clipboard, so I guess she's got an agenda of who's coming and when they're coming. And he asked them if the people inside knew that they were coming, and they said yes. They had some flowers and gift bags. And they were greeted kindly and warmly at the door and allowed in. So, all's well with Ms. Meng Wanzhou, the daughter of the founder of Huawei, who is now in Dunbar, her house, now that the assessments are done for They're released now for the assessment period that ended in July of last year. Her house is worth a little bit less than it was a few months ago, but it's still over $5 million and is still a comfortable place to live, albeit with some private security company escort vehicles and staff, which are part of her bail conditions. That certainly was the big international story. No other story touched that at all in British Columbia, perhaps even in Western Canada in 2018. The amount of attention it attracted. She was arrested, of course, December 1st at Vancouver International Airport from Hong Kong on her way to Mexico. She ended up being in a women's jail in Maple Ridge. And we found out several days later that she was in jail, and that ignited the international diplomatic incident where China decided to take revenge by arresting a couple of innocent Canadians whose only crime appears to have been being Canadian in China. And they're definitely not enjoying anywhere near the comfort that Ms. Meng is in her house in Dunbar, where she has a curfew and she has, geographical limitations too. All things considered, she's probably enjoying it there much more than she was in Maple Ridge, but the Chinese government wants her freed altogether. This is going to be an interesting one as it gets closer to February. There is a deadline for the United States to file its case, so we're going to see more of what the U.S. has in terms of evidence. We already know the allegations and have seen some of the evidence about how they're using a subsidiary to do business with Iran without letting people know that Huawei was actually doing business with Iran, contrary to both EU and U.S. trade embargoes against Iran. So the U.S. believes that she is guilty of fraud, but of course needs to be extradited first and then tried. And she's already said that she's innocent, and she will fight both the extradition and she will fight a trial if she does get sent to the U.S. But that could take months, if not years, and I think the word years is probably the operative word. We saw what happened many years ago with a couple other people who were wanted by their home countries. Rakesh Saxena was wanted in Thailand. A fellow with an Indian background was wanted in Thailand. He was caught here in 1996 and didn't go to Thailand until 2009. So that's one extreme there. It could be a long time before Meng Wanzhou leaves Dunbar to face trial in the United States. But in the meantime, what will become of the Canada-China trade relations, and will Canada open its eyes to what has been found by the Australians and the New Zealanders, even by the Americans, that Huawei really is an arm of the Chinese government, albeit a private company, but one with very close ties to the leadership in China, with a close eye on the political leadership goals and aspirations for China to become a world leader and to potentially use its technology for surreptitious means to steal trade secrets, to learn more about other countries. Is Huawei, as has been described by some, essentially just part of the Chinese security and surveillance apparatus.
Are they not the company being used by TELUS to install their 5G mini towers?
Yep, TELUS and Huawei actually enjoy a very close relationship. Huawei is distributed by Rogers and Bell. They distribute their products, but TELUS has a close relationship. They have an R&D center in Vancouver, and Huawei also is a major donor to the science faculty at UBC as part of the R&D for their 5G network as well. It might cost a lot of money if things change and TELUS decides to switch to a different company, but at the same time, one must question why they got in bed with that company when there have been concerns expressed elsewhere about the use of that company's products. So 2019 is going to be an interesting one, especially now that with the Meng Wanzhou arrest, we really have reached the tipping point. We've finally caught up to Australia to realize that the People's Republic of China is playing a very large role in trying to influence our politicians, our institutions. Australia, just like Canada, has a very large Chinese diaspora. It's got a large diaspora of people who are not just from mainland China, but also from Hong Kong and Taiwan. Not all Chinese people are the same, just to say the least. And they don't all think the same, and they're not all very happy that the country that they now live in has close ties with China, which is a society which has adopted our free market kind of idea with capitalism, but certainly is still a one-party state that uses rule by law, not rule of law, and there's no freedom of speech. And they routinely jail lawyers and journalists and other citizens who might question the authority of the state. And we've seen what happened in Australia, where political donations by Australian Chinese entities came under the microscope. We're seeing some of the similar situation here, where during the civic election back in October, a group called the Canada-Wenju Friendship Society in Richmond was offering money to people to go to the polls and vote for a list of candidates that they had endorsed, mostly Chinese candidates in Vancouver, Burnaby, and in Richmond. That was one issue there. And earlier in 2018, we also saw a major convention happen in Vancouver. The convention at the Vancouver Convention Center called the 9th International Congress of the Guangdong Community Federation. Most people who have immigrated from China or have heritage from China anywhere in the world can tie it back to Guangdong province, which is close to Hong Kong. And that convention brought a couple thousand people here, including the vice minister of the Chinese Communist Party's United Front, a fellow named Su Bo. There was talk at that conference about Xi Jinping's pet project, the Belt and Road Initiative, which is the massive infrastructure building project by China in Asia, Africa, and Europe. They were ticking a lot of boxes that were put in front of them by Beijing. That happened, and then in June there was a high-level delegation from Beijing that came and met with the BC NDP cabinet, including a fellow named Wang Chen, who's a member of the Politburo, and the Politburo is really the inner circle of power for Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping himself doesn't have term limits anymore. That was announced just a few hours before the closing ceremony of the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics, because Beijing had a portion of that closing ceremony. They're getting the Winter Olympics in 2022, and the presentation at the Pyeongchang closing ceremony included a video greeting from Xi Jinping, who just a few hours earlier was announced as essentially the president for life of China. So long after Donald Trump is gone, there's some people that hope he gets impeached this year, but he could last until January 2025. Well, Xi Jinping is going to be around a lot longer than that, and Xi Jinping doesn't have some of the same checks and balances and limits on power that Donald Trump has, and Xi Jinping isn't in a country where the Constitution is held up as a sacred document. Xi Jinping really is in many ways the most powerful leader in the world, someone we've got to look at a little bit more and pay more attention to. China is the second biggest economy in the world, and it's also British Columbia's second biggest trade partner. We've become very reliant on them. But we've also become reliant on them for, resources, for buying our natural resources, buying our minerals and gas and oil. Alberta, of course, wants to sell more oil to China, and that's why the pipeline debate happened last year, and that shows no signs of abating this year, especially when Alberta is going to the polls with the provincial election this year. There are other problems. I mean, Anbang Insurance, that's the company that owned the Bentall Towers. Beijing essentially took over that company when the chairman of the company was sent to jail for 18 years for fraud. That company also owns the Retirement Concepts seniors homes chain. Well, Anbang Insurance, now controlled by Beijing, has put the Bentall Center Towers for sale. See if anyone buys that. Of course, we saw the headlines of birth tourism, Richmond Hospital. It's worse than people thought in terms of numbers, and there was the famed $1 million baby lawsuit. Vancouver Coastal Health is pursuing a woman from China who left a bill that was unpaid, that with interest is now worth $1 million. The federal government took a petition and tabled a petition in the House of Commons. It's not going to ban birth tourism, but it's going to take a closer look at the numbers, which are, again, higher than had been previously reported. And we, of course, saw, real estate have some ups and downs this year. And we saw the Peter German report that was released back in June, which talked more about the Vancouver model, about how Chinese gamblers connected to Chinese gangs have been coming and gambling a lot of money at BC casinos and laundering the proceeds of crime that have been involved with the import of drugs that have been purchased from those in Latin America. And, of course, we've seen some of that money find its way into the real estate industry and inflate the real estate industry. And finally, another big deal that happened China-wise was that an arm of the Chinese government, China Communications Construction Company, wanted to buy Econ Construction, one of the companies that's working on Site C. The federal government turned down the $1.5 billion takeover. They said it was for national security reasons. So lots of interesting headlines in 2018 about China and about Canada, and don't expect that to slow down at all.
We'll have more with Bob Mackin right after this.
Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Magnum Gold Corp, MGI and the TSX Venture Exchange. A 2015 drill program on the LH property intersected several high-grade gold intersections, including 11 meters of 20.66 grams per ton gold. Additional drill targets on the LH property have been identified by a 2018 drone airborne magnetic survey to further evaluate a pyrrhotite enriched gold-bearing system. Please visit our website at magnumgoldcorp.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Bob Mackin. Bob, you did some comparisons for taking the last month of Gregor Robertson's rule as Vancouver mayor and the first month of Kennedy Stewart's rule in the city. What's the contrast here?
Well, Gregor Robertson was on a bit of a victory tour, and Kennedy Stewart was on a bit of a get-to-know-you tour. Gregor Robertson's last day in office, November 2nd, it was a Friday. It was interesting because he ended it at the Seaforth Armory. I managed to finagle my way into what I was surprised to find was essentially the Vision Vancouver farewell party, where there was a lot of back patting and a lot of long faces, however, in suits that are more expensive than the ones they could afford to buy 10 years before, and a lot of people left in cars that are more expensive than the ones they could buy 10 years before. A lot of people who jumped on the Vision Vancouver train made good for themselves, maybe not so much for the rest of the city, but there were several hundred people at that event to wish Mayor Gregor Robertson well after his last full business day in office. Earlier that day, there were photo ops. Concord Pacific said it was going to finally build some non-market housing on the various half dozen plots of land near False Creek that they had not developed before. There was also an IT education partnership that was announced with the provincial government at one of the Vancouver City schools. And it was interesting at that news conference, the CEO of a company called Broadband TV was there, a woman named Shahrzad Rafati, which is very interesting because just a few weeks earlier, on October 20th, the source told me that she was seen with Gregor Robertson at a voting station. And funny enough, if you've seen her Twitter feed and Gregor Robertson's Twitter feed, they were in Paris at the same time in November, around Remembrance Day, and lo and behold, around Christmas Day and Boxing Day, they were just happened to be in Morocco at the same time. I think that there might be a friendship between Ms. Rafati and Mr. Robertson that goes back to the days when he was mayor. And there was also an interesting thing that I found that Gregor Robertson declared her birthday back in August as Shahrzad Rafati Day in Vancouver. Some interesting things there for Gregor Robertson. I guess that's the question might be, could he have a role in that company in the future, Broadband TV? I know it's a company that has been applauded by people in the Vision Vancouver sphere, like Joel Solomon, the major Vision Vancouver funder in years gone by, as a bit of a technology star here in Vancouver. His last interview was with Francis Bula of the Globe Mail on November 1st. There was also a thank you tour of a downtown east side social housing building, which caused a little bit of a ruckus in the last days of the NDP, building that BC Housing paid more than $7 million for the land from Wall Financial. Back in February 2016, Wall Financial had, in the same week, donated a large sum of money to the BC Liberal Party. Interesting how these sort of things work. But they eventually did build 104 subsidized and 68 market rentals on the edge of Chinatown. So Robertson did a bit of a tour there. There was a party on October 30th at the Vancouver Mayor's office, according to his calendar. Didn't say if that was a Halloween party, but you can bet that there might have been someone with a costume or something. And there was also a team photo after the last city council meeting. He had other meetings back in October before Election Day with the CEO of TELUS, Darren Entwistle. He went to a Southeast Falls Creek and Olympic Village celebration hosted by Bob Rennie, the marketer of the Olympic Village. That was at the Tap and Barrel. Same day, Robertson met with Darren Entwistle. Of course, Bob Rennie was not only the marketer of the Olympic Village, but also a fundraiser for the BC Liberal Party and for Vision Vancouver years ago. And there was also an event for the general manager of real estate, Bill Ojla, at the Terra Breads in the Olympic Village in late September. There were also meetings between Robertson and Jim Pattison and Glenn Clark, the former BC Premier. That was on October 15th. Robertson also found himself at the September 28th National Day celebration for the local consulate for China. So that's what happened with Gregor Robertson in his last weeks in office. Now, Kennedy Stewart, his calendar, which I also got through Freedom of Information, showed a lot of orientation meetings. That the members of City Council were going to a lot of orientation meetings, were going to a lot of city offices, city installations. They even went to the fire department training center and dressed up as firefighters to have almost a day in the life of a firefighter, to know what it's like to don that gear and go to battle against the fires in the city. So he had his first meeting 2 days after being sworn in with Sadhu Johnston, the city manager. He went to the Chinatown Foundation Gala. Then November 8th, he flew over to Victoria, met with a handful of NDP cabinet ministers, and looks like his first big interview was with Red FM, the South Asian broadcasting company here locally. And caucus meetings, there's, of course, 5 MPA members. There's 3 Greens, member of One City, member of COPE. He apparently is going to be doing this regularly, sitting down with each of those politicians to do as Mike Harcourt did, or at least tried to do back in his term as mayor, to try to reach consensus. There were other events. There was the Night of 1,000 Stars, sponsored by TELUS, the Park Casino. There was Jenny Kwan's 25 years in politics, Remembrance Day. He had a phone meeting with Desmond Cole, the Toronto activist who came to Vancouver for a political fundraiser and said that he was stopped and asked for his identification by Vancouver police for no reason whatsoever, he said. There was the reopening of Ross Street Sikh Temple. There was a lunch with city councillors from 1986, and speaking engagements with the Unifor Union, and also an appearance at the We Day charity concert. Interesting day, November 23rd, I pinpoint. Bob Williams, who was the cabinet minister with the NDP for many years, he was from the Dave Barrett era, powerful cabinet minister who also got appointments from the NDP in the 1990s on a number of files. There was Jerry Zhang and Ed May from Coromandel Properties, and there was also a meeting with Anthony and Tom Papajohn from Jameson Development. So, meeting with pairs of people from 2 important developers on the same day in November. I also found it interesting that Kennedy Stewart was making congratulatory phone calls to mayors in neighboring municipalities. He had phone calls with the new mayors in North Van City and District, and also a call with Malcolm Brody in Richmond. That's something that I didn't see Gregor Robertson do too much of during his time in office, to reach out to those politicians in neighboring municipalities. So I think that's an important thing to do, because not everyone who is in Vancouver lives, works, and plays in Vancouver. There are a lot of people that live and play on the North Shore but work in Vancouver, and a lot of people that live in Vancouver and work and play in Richmond. There are no borders here, and we're interdependent on other municipalities, and I think it's only prudent that a new mayor does reach out to those, because of the common problems and common solutions that can be made, not just at the Metro Vancouver table, but bilateral. I think that's a smart thing for him to do. We'll see if he carries that on. One surprise was that the name Raymond Louis popped up. Raymond Louis on November 28th was one of the meetings for Kennedy Stewart. Raymond Louis, you might remember, is a longtime city councillor with Vision Vancouver, and someone who was, for a short period of time, touted as a potential mayoral candidate to succeed Gregor Robertson. He didn't run, of course. There were health issues in his house, and he decided that enough was enough. Of course, there was a recent event for the real estate industry where he suggested that he was ready to be hired by anyone in the real estate industry. Well, Raymond Louis went and met with Kennedy Stewart on November 28th. I didn't hear back from anyone in Kennedy Stewart's office, but have been told by some sources that Raymond Louis is offering some transition help to help Kennedy Stewart navigate the halls of power, to offer some of his institutional and historical knowledge to the new mayor.
So two totally different kind of paths yet. It seems in Vancouver, without the, influence or cooperation of the real estate industry, you don't get much done.
True. They're going to be there one way or another, because that's what city halls are all about, really, when it comes down to it. Their job is land use. They deliver services, but but they really are all about land use, and those who want to use the land, who want to use the land to buy and sell and build, are always going to find their way into the corridors of power. The question is, in this new reality with this fractured council we have, where there's no one dominant party that has a majority vote, and you've got a mayor who is officially independent, although he is Labour-backed, and we do have the campaign finance reforms from a couple of years ago that I think that's still a work in progress. It is a different landscape, that it isn't going to be as easy for those in the real estate development construction industries to walk on into City Hall anymore and tell the politicians and tell the bureaucrats how high to jump. We'll see if Kennedy Stewart does uphold this or protect this new reality, or if the real estate development and construction lobbies find other ways to cause influence. One thing that he has put into motion is to ask the provincial government to amend the lobbyist registry provincially to bring in the City of Vancouver. Now, City of Vancouver could have acted on its own to create its own lobbyist registry, similar to what Surrey did. There is a section in the Vancouver Charter that allows City Hall to regulate types of business, and they could have done that pretty easily on their own, but he is of the mind that the provincial lobbyist registry already exists, that a lot of the same people who are lobbying provincially will be lobbying municipally, and that it wouldn't take much in the way of resources just to bring Vancouver into the provincial law and have the provincial lobbyist registry also be the place where those who want to lobby City of Vancouver can file their papers. So we'll see that in the next few months. The NDP will be back in session. NDP government will be back in session in February. See if they announce the bill. It's only the right thing to do, because citizens here for too long have been in the dark about those who have knocked on doors at City Hall to ask for grants, ask for laws to be changed. And a lot of those people who were lobbying were also people connected to political parties and to big donations. I think this is just the smart thing to do as you build a reform package. He's also talking about new rules for conflict of interest to prevent the revolving door. We already saw that the Vancouver Affordable Housing president leave to go to work for a modular housing company, which has had contracts with City of Vancouver, which might want more contracts with City of Vancouver. There was nothing untoward by what he did, because there is no limit on post-government employment in the municipal sphere as there is in the provincial sphere, where if you do leave a management job in government, central government, at one of the ministries, you do have regulations on what you can and can't do in your first year of non-government employment. So we could see some more movement on those reform packages and make things a little more transparent at Vancouver City Hall. But for the time being, the only thing we can really base our opinion on so far with the Kennedy Stewart mayoralty is the budget, and the budget that they adopted has been knocked as being more of a Vision Vancouver budget, a budget that was already in progress in the months before the election, and it includes some tax increases that are not popular with some of the NPA members, and there isn't enough cost cutting there. There's a lot of fat that can be chopped. There's the communications department, which has about 45 plus people, a communications department that is better resourced than the city's gardening department. That's one area that I know some of the NPA are interested in seeing some cutbacks there. But over the next 10 or 11 months, we're going to see Kennedy Stewart put his stamp on the mayoralty, and we'll see how he manages this council, if he can have some consensus. I mean, they're having some good signs where some of the Green members have worked with some of the NPA members. There are some extremes there. I don't know if Dean Swanson from COPE is going to be willing to work with the NPA members on major legislation. But that's the goal of Kennedy Stewart. He says he's going to try to reach consensus and prevent the polarization that has happened on past councils. Good luck to him.
Bob, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you.
My guest has been award-winning investigative reporter Bob Mackin, the publisher of TheBreaker.News, his website, TheBreaker.ca. You're listening to the Goddard Report on TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Find us on Twitter at TalkDigitalNet, our YouTube channel, Talk Digital Network. Questions for Bob or any of our other guests can be sent to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.